Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's Slater Success Live. I'm thrilled to be here. It's exciting. This is September 28th for those of you who are just tuning in. And I always look at today as it's almost the beginning of the fourth quarter. I mean, how time flew. Being as a business coach and consultant with Slater Success and leading this company for probably 13 years now or more, I think the fourth quarter is actually one of the most important quarters of the year. It's the quarter that we really get an enormous amount done. We see great movement in business. We see great movement in so many areas. And it's exciting. You know, we're in a change of season and everything else. So today I brought on a really great guest. It's a team of two. Company is Dashboard Enterprises. I've gotten to know Dashboard over the years, and they are a remote CFO and bookkeeping company. One of the things about the world today is more, remote used to not be really norm. It is norm now. There is no longer a reason to bring in, CFOs and bookkeepers to our offices anymore. And this is an industry that has really taken off. Dashboard is led by Carol Soman, the CEO, and Mathew Heggem, the president. I'm thrilled to have them. Feel free to ask questions, leave comments, and let us know what's on your mind as we come into what is remote in the world of CFO and bookkeeping and how the impacts are on your business. Carol and Mathew, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Ivy. It's nice to be here.
Yay. Happy to be here.
So, we're all pretty, current on LinkedIn. We're all pretty active. So it's an exciting thing to be at. And I already threw out to the viewers who are live to feel free to come in and ask questions, comment. This is an opportunity to get two great brains, two people who've led businesses for years and years on what do we need to know today? How are things going on in business today? And what is going on in the world? So Carol, can you take a minute and just introduce us to Dashboard and tell me a little bit about how this got started for you?
So basically, I spent most of my career being a CFO. I'm a CPA by trade, but really didn't want to do that route. Almost 10 years ago, I started this as really a part-time CFO business by myself, thinking that, okay, I'm a good CFO. I could start a business, no problem. Didn't realize that being a good CFO meant I was a good business owner. And boy, was I shocked when I learned all the things I didn't know about running a business. But here I am close to 10 years later, and we have a wonderful team of 12 people and grew the business. And so it's very exciting. We started off as part-time CFO, but we grew it as we saw the needs develop for bookkeeping and for controllership services, and Dashboard as a service also came along. So we responded to the marketplace. We were on site a lot in the beginning, but as more technology came about, we were able to do a lot more remote. And that was also one of the reasons how we developed our workforce, that we really looked for women, especially that wanted this work-life balance, and they were able to do it through technology. They were able to have the flexibility to work at home, to take care of their kids, to be a mother and an employee at the same time with a challenging job. And the same thing from time to time, we had dads who also wanted that, young people who wanted that. So we were able to develop a really special team around that.
So you guys were really cutting edge and going in this whole remote direction early on in actually feeling a need in with your clients, as well as be able to build a team on what people are looking for now, what they were always looking for, but wasn't out there early on.
Well, I like to tell the story of this one guy who called us 3 years ago and says, look, my controller's retiring. I'd like you to come in. Can you come in 4 days a week? I said, listen, we can help you, but we just can't do 4 days. That's not our model. I don't have anybody that's going to come into the city 4 days. I mean, you just hire somebody yourself. Well, okay, let me think about it. And then didn't hear from him. And then a year later, he calls me. He says, my controller never really retired, but do you think he could do it 2 days? I said, I think it would be a little tough, but I think we can work something out, And he said, oh, let me think about it. And his controller never retired. And finally, his controller said, like, let me go already. Like, I'm ready to go. And he called me back and he says, forgot the guy's name. He's ready to go. Can you come in and talk to me, please? He says, and I don't care anymore. I like this remote model. And so he after 2 years, he was ready. This was during the pandemic. He was finally ready to realize that this can work. So I think there's been a big mind shift change in people as they saw what went on and they saw that this was doable. And we were so set up for it that we didn't really have to pivot. We had this already in place when we started.
I love that. I love that. Thanks, Carol. Now, Mathew, you're back. You came into Dashboard in the last, more in the recent, not in the early stages, but you have a whole background in this industry as well. And so what caused you to really jump in this way, and where do you see this going?
In terms of where Dashboard can go, or in terms of the remote?
First, how did you? What's your little bit about you and your background and how you got involved in this?
Yeah, so I'm a non-traditional entrant into the world of accounting. I started out actually in the workforce development side. I'm specifically training bookkeepers on how to enter into the workforce, and that moved me over into the for-profit world. I then got into firm growth and firm development, mostly on the marketing and sales side. But at one point, very early on, I got very interested in accounting technology. And in fact, I would say I got obsessed with accounting technology. And that led me into, fast forward many years later, speaking at conferences like QuickBooks and XeroCon and writing articles and interviewing entrepreneurs who were really leading the way in terms of building the technology for the accounting profession. So, so my relationship to this work is not as a bookkeeper. I'm not a controller. I'm not a CFO. But what I am is somebody who really understands the importance of what it means to hire the right accounting professional. And I think one of the things that I really appreciate about what's happened in light of having transitioned to globally to a remote workforce is that people are actually realizing that it's actually doable. But what's also interesting and perhaps not discussed is that, in fact, there's a lot of other unspoken benefits to the remote model that people aren't witness to, that I'm present to. So, for example, if you hire your own bookkeeper, controller, or CFO as the CEO or entrepreneur or business owner, you become then responsible for that person's professional development. And subsequently, if they have a maternity leave or get sick and need some time away, you are responsible for filling that person's seat. That's our responsibility, and ultimately the responsibility of an agency like ours. When we have somebody who needs some time off or maybe even just extra support, we're actually able to provide that infrastructure and create a system for them to optimize the workflow and ultimately improve the experience. So just that the work gets done. So I think leaning into that more explicitly and looking at technology and the utilization of technology to improve the experience of the customer is what we're all about.
Yeah, and it's wild because, I go back from being a business owner for 20 some odd years, and we'll just kind of leave it at that and stop adding. But in the olden days, as I refer to this, your bookkeepers, your accountants, they came in and they opened the big ledgers and they would go through, and you would have these meetings and then everything kind of went online, but they still came in because everything was on your office, right? That was the access point. Now everything is so doable on so many different levels between the remote and the technology advancement in the industry. It has really accelerated. And one of the things, Mathew, that I love that you're bringing out is there is nothing worse for a CEO and president of a company to not have their fingers on the pulse of the numbers. There is nothing worse. When you have somebody who, very sad to say, on the good side, maternity, on the good side, a long vacation, a honeymoon, on the very, very sad side of when there's unusual things that take people out of positions for a period of times, like, illnesses, deaths in families and things like that happen, that spur of the moment thing. And then all of a sudden you don't have that information to lead your business forward.
Yeah.
And that's where I love the model that is so current these days. And that Dashboard is, in this remote that you don't have to miss a beat as that leader.
Mm. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think one of the things that many people learned the hard way in this last year was that actually you need your accountant. Like, you really need them. And particularly when you have to think about really transforming your business model, rethinking your pricing strategy, understanding the impact of losing revenue, understanding the impact of having all these bills to still pay. You know, you've got a lease and you've got rent and you've got all these challenges, but your business is being completely disrupted. Your market is in fact being completely disrupted. So what I'm observing, and in our experience talking to entrepreneurs and business owners on the front lines today, is that, it used to be, in my many years in sales and in helping entrepreneurs find accounting solutions, there always was a really clear concern about cost, right? Obviously, they're worried about the cost of compliance and wanting to manage and minimize the cost. Now, the cost is still a part of the conversation, but the two things that come up really regularly in my conversations with entrepreneurs, one is managing cash flow, which is something that we do really well at Dashboard. Carol is one of the cash flow queens and the profit leak queens in the world. So we're very happy about that. But the other thing is actually access and communication. I think one of the biggest complaints we get from our inbound clients as they talk about the different solutions that are available to them is, oh, I can't get my CPA on the phone. They won't answer these questions. I've been emailing them and I haven't gotten a response. And I think that's a forgotten that's a forgotten skill set on the part of the accountants, and that it's important.
It's a forgotten art form, to actually, the old fashioned way of picking up a phone and actually talking to people versus, typing at them. It is a forgotten art form, and we need to be able to talk to our professional counsel.
Correct. Yeah, and they need to make themselves available. I think there is, and furthermore, there's an expectation now. I mean, clients are asking questions and needing answers that don't have anything to do with the tax form at the end of the year. They want feedback on how to spend their money, what to do with their, if they need to fire an employee or let somebody go, and make major financial decisions that will have an impact on their lives.
And I want to jump in here for a second, because you said something, and I want to ask Carol about this, because my antennas went up. and listeners, those who are coming in live, feel free to leave a comment. What's resonating with you? What are you taking away from the conversation? As well as those listeners who are, if you have a question, of course, pop that into the chat. For those listeners who are watching this on replay or catching this as it's going through LinkedIn, when things are resonating with you or a question pops up, please feel free to put it into the stream. Carol, Mathew, and I will continue to check in for days on end and make sure to be attentive to what is being commented on and any questions you have. Carol, when Mathew said you're the queen of blank, blank, and blank, my antennas went up on profit leaks, because I have a pet peeve, and I've had for years, and I speak to my clients about this all the time, is money being left on the table, to the point that I'm discussing this at a major conference in a few weeks as one of my key points, because it drives me crazy when my clients are not looking at the money being left on the table. Profit leaks, Carol, what does that refer to, and what are you seeing in out there in this area with clients and other people?
So when I refer to profit leaks, I refer to broken processes in a business that creates a leak and just things that create leaks, and then money just drips out. So for instance, I'll give you an example of a client years ago. They shipped UPS. So they did a lot of UPS to small specialty stores. Every time they shipped to a specialty store and they had the wrong address, they got charged $4 back in the day from UPS for incorrect address. And so UPS still figured out the address, but they kept shipping it. They never thought to change the address in their computer system. So they kept shipping multiple shipments, and they were a big company, multiple shipments. By the time they got done at the end of the year, it was $50,000 in fines. All they had to do is create a process to go back into the system and change the address. So somebody needed to just go from accounting to the shipping department and create this process of fixing these addresses. $50,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but if you think about what that equates to in sales, depending upon what your margins are and what your bottom line numbers are, that's a lot of money for something so small to fix, right? Easy, right? It's much easier than chasing a sale. So those are the kinds of things that are just obscure. They have to just be really looked at and analyzed and re-engineered. And it's usually not that difficult, but as businesses grow and scale, the back end always seems to fall behind the front end. And it's just scurrying about just to get things out the door, just to get that stuff out the door, just to finish that project. And often people don't really think about what's going on. So what we do is we kind of take a step back, look at the process, figure out like where we can do it better, what's happening, what's falling through the cracks, fixing that. And then it's just money right down to the bottom line. It's money in your pocket. So we try to kind of say, okay, like we're going to get to the point where we're going to give you an ROI on our services of 4 to 1. So we're going to try to find those profit leaks 4 times of what is the investment in our services. So when I think of money left on the table, I think of incorrect pricing. I think of, things like that. When profit leaks, I just think of broken processes or reworks or things that just are process, driven.
Yeah. And, one of the things you said that is near and dear to my heart, it's a lot easier to fix and find those $50,000, $10,000, $60,000, whatever it is, than the cost of client acquisitions of new clients. Okay. Cost of employee turnover, client acquisition are always higher than we ever realize. But this is a way to really, really pay attention to our business and be able to take that money. That is found money. It's found money in profits. It's found money that you can take a percentage of it and put it into marketing and sales that will grow the company. I love that. And it is so vitally important. Mick Collins is coming in. Hey, Mick, nice to see you. The benefit, he's saying the benefit of taking a wider look. So often we miss out on that. We get so caught up in the weeds of day-to-day business.
But when businesses scale, it's such a natural thing because, you're just you get all this new business and you're just trying to service it. And sometimes you're prepared and sometimes you're not, but you just keep going, right? You just want to get that business out the door. And you just, sometimes you do it at not even thinking about the cost. Like, when you're an importer, we've had clients that over the years that have been importers, and sometimes they bring in freight on, back in the day when things were normal, and they have to bring in goods air freight. And I always say, like, if you have to air freight your goods, that means your process is broken, because that means you didn't order the good, you didn't even know what you had in your inventory, you didn't order the right goods at the right time. So air freight is probably 4 times the cost of ocean freight. So when I see air freight on a client's income statement, I really get concerned because I know they're doing something wrong. And so we go back and we re-examine, like, what caused you to have this rush to air goods into your clients? This is people who import whatever. And usually it's because of, incorrect inventory, incorrect production, incorrect, ordering of goods on time. And so that's another area that stands out in my mind. Like, okay, that's a real red flag to me. Something's not right.
So this is so much more than keeping up your books.
That's more on the CFO side. And it's more than just figuring out that, you're better off buying a ream of paper from Amazon than Staples. It's so much more than just shop pricing, comparative shop pricing on office supplies. It goes so much deeper than that. And our team is so used to doing that. We're not going to sit here and figure out what telephone service you should use. Like, we can do that, but that's not really the value that we deliver.
That makes sense. Mick is jumping in again and saying acquiring new clients still doesn't stop the leak. Which is just what we're talking about. Exact. So Mathew, now dashboard, one of the things that, as I've gotten to know you guys, you do business with, as many of us do, we do business with a lot of different types of companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, as a consultant and coach, we're always looking at like, where is our sweet spots? Where are our niches? And one of the things I really admire about how you've structured the company is that you are so clear on, where your sweet spots are. How, share a little bit about that and how you've cultivated this and how you nurture this. And so let's start with what your sweet spots are, what your niches are, and how did this develop? Do you just make a conscious decision, or you actually you do an evaluation on business?
Well, I think yes, and is the answer to your question, right? So to be clear, Carol and I have decided really to focus on entering into three markets in this year: e-commerce, family offices, and the cannabis space. And each one of those has its own distinct nature, if you will, and subsequently, we have our own relationship to those environments and those ecosystems. So going to the first one, e-commerce, I think that's really where we put most of our attention going into this year. And part of it was just really getting more acquainted with what were some of the bigger picture challenges that the e-commerce clients face. It goes back to Mick's comment about taking the wider look or the wider lens at what's going on and understanding that, look, it's not just about making sure that, that financial statement is accurate for tax purposes, but that actually when that entrepreneur looks at that financial statement, they can start to understand, oh, that product is selling really well. That product is not selling so well. That product sells great on this platform, but not on this platform. And if I really look at the cost structures involved in selling that product or making that product, yeah, this one might be great in terms of quantity, but the margins are better on this one. And if I spend a little bit more money over here, then by golly, I can actually grow this business. And I think what gets missed in the context of choosing the right accounting professional is that skill set of discerning the bigger picture needs of the clients is not always something that one bookkeeper or controller has per se, but rather that you also need that CFO lens as much as you need that bookkeeper lens. And so therefore, what we've been doing is really also focusing on, okay, getting the bigger picture lens of what's going on, understanding what some of those business goals might be, and then taking a step back and looking at some of the different technology solutions that are available to the clients. Because the other factor that the e-commerce businesses are dealing with is a lot of data coming from multiple data points. And so if you're selling in multiple channels, you've got a physical store and you've got an online store, and you allow your customers to buy things on Amazon, and then you've got influencers who are selling things on Instagram. How do you really keep track of all of the bits and pieces? And by golly, when sales go up, it's just more data to deal with. And so internally, we're also working with the team to make sure that they understand how to really automate and manage the data flow and get acquainted with the different technology platforms that are available to the entrepreneur.
And I want to chime in here for a moment, because a year and a half ago, e-commerce, yes, was a relevant business and a business 100%. There was so much available online. The pandemic has accelerated e-commerce so significantly that it's really important in that e-commerce space to have proper, what we were talking about before, you always have to be knowing what's going on in your numbers, in your finances, in your business. And e-commerce, in the explosion of it, is you want professionals surrounding you, and there's so many questions around e-commerce, and there's so much, can we sell it this way? And what do we need to do about this? And somebody's going to say, oh, I've been making my soaps at home, and I used to sell them to a couple of boutique stores, and now I'm creating this online platform, and it's anywhere and everywhere. So that is incredibly important and growing excessively out there. So it's nice to know that there's professionals who really have the knowledge around that.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that that's one of the markets that we chose in particular, because I actually happen to love e-commerce businesses. I think that entrepreneurs in that space are very creative and intelligent and fun and funky, and they're the classic entrepreneur, but they're technology oriented, which I also appreciate. But I think what there is to know about the value of finding a provider like us that is willing to take on inventory-based businesses is that not a lot of bookkeepers, controllers, and accounting professionals actually want to even deal with that level of data, in part because they're not subsequently willing to learn about the new technology and the automation solutions that are available. So, so that's one really important thing to keep in mind.
And I want to actually jump in looking at this concept of willing to learn, because I think there's something important there. The cannabis industry is a very, very new industry.
Yeah.
Especially on the legal side. Well, at least on the legal side,
yes.
but it's a very new industry. There's systems and procedures and so much that is first being established on it. And it's really, I have to say, I admire 100% that dashboard. Carol, you built this 10 years ago, and yet you're still staying, your integrity in the company is staying on the cutting edge out there of what's happening in the marketplace today. And it's so easy. And Carol, I'd love you to weigh in on this. It is so easy for businesses to become complacent, and we
get left behind. You get left behind in the dust.
Yeah, it's from our own businesses to the clients you see. And, I admire you guys and your leadership, because your thought process is so, we need to be not where business is today, but where business is going. What's happening next in business. And there's a select few out there who are willing to do that, because it does take a consistency in learning and a consistency in foresight and risk.
Agreed.
So before we start coming to a close, God, time's flying today. Again, live viewers, any comments or questions, feel free to weigh in. Those of you who are seeing us and watching this on replay or watching the captions underneath, please know you can continue to comment. You continue to ask questions. Carol, Mathew, and I will be continuing to weigh in on the stream. Mick is saying that was a great point. And the cannabis industry is tricky financially as well as legally. Boy, is it. What is going on here? What do we need to know? We have a short time, so what are some tips?
Well, I'll give you a nutshell. I mean, okay. And Carol and I have been very diligent about getting into this industry, right? There's a lot of T's you want to cross and I's you want to dot. And so we're fortunate to have some people in our community who have been guiding us and mentoring us in the industry. So that's great. But I recently got back from the cannabis conference back in August, end of August in Las Vegas. And yes, I will say that the legal and tax and financial component is significant. It is in fact true that there is a much higher hill to climb for these entrepreneurs in this industry. But the truth is they are also entrepreneurs just like everyone else. And that means that they do actually need people from outside of the cannabis industry to come in and help them to understand. Forget that there is, uniqueness to constructing a financial statement for that business. They just need somebody to help them understand the financial statement. That's financial statement to 101. What is the profit and loss? What is the balance sheet? How do I actually understand this data? And then think about systems, because systems thinking is something that the CFO or the controller can come in. And inventory is inventory. How you manage inventory and manage cash. It's not as foreign on one hand that I think people make it out to be, because these entrepreneurs are just trying to piece together some of the basics of business operations.
These are businesses that are scaling very quickly. Because it's a new and rapid industry. So as a business scales quickly, the leadership really has to be on all their systems, their numbers. So more power to you guys on stepping in. It's obviously there are markets that have an enormous amount of alignment and that are in your sweet spot. Although you're gaining new knowledge, you're gaining it at a rapid pace. Mick had to say, you don't want your inventory going up in smoke. Yeah, boy, don't you?
Well, you might if you're selling it, but that's a different story. That means the product's good. But yeah.
You can always count on Mick to be clever.
Yeah.
his questions.
Yeah.
Carol, any last thoughts or tips for our audience and what they need to know as far as if they're for their finances and stepping into the last quarter of the year?
I just think you really just need, I think that it's been a tough year overall, a tough year and a half for businesses. And I think that what's happened is that a lot of owners and CEOs have so much to deal with. And I know, like in New York, every week or two, there's another law that you have to deal with. I mean, it just doesn't stop. And I know that it just to comply with stuff is just, the compliance piece is so onerous. So I think that times is, your priorities are always shifting. I think it's really important to know your numbers, speak with your CPA, see where you're at. Do you need to do anything by the end of the year? Understand where you are from a tax perspective. Do you need to do things things you should be doing now to minimize your tax liability at the end of the year? I mean, we often work with clients, CPAs work really well to at least give them an indication as to where the client will be at the end of the year. And let's do things now in September and October, not December 15th, because you really don't have a lot of time. So speak to your CPA, get your numbers ready, make sure they're up to date and they're correct. Talk to your accountant, see where you are tax-wise, see if there's things you can do. That's what I suggest. Try to look at your business, see if you can think of, see if you're looking at, are you developing your own, key performance indicators? Are you understanding the profitability in your business, whether it's a service-based business? Are you looking at what clients are profitable, what clients are not profitable?
And I'm going to stop you there. And I'm going to stop you here, Carol.
I could go on forever.
Right. Viewers, listeners, here's the thing. Carol was listing such important tips. Okay. If you don't have these on your fingertips, thank you, Rosanna, for chiming in. Excellent advice, Carol. Mick is saying excellent advice, and great job. If you don't have these on your fingertips, reach out to your professionals. Okay. Don't sit back. We are stepping into quarter 4 in a matter of days, Friday, people. This is why this was an important conversation to have with Carol and Mathew of Dashboard today. So thank you all for joining us here. Keep the comments coming. Keep the questions coming. If you have something that you really want to be direct at, remember to message Carol and Mathew on LinkedIn. And I believe, Mathew, you have your own LinkedIn Live show starting soon. Give that a quick plug.
Yes, we have a show coming up at the end of the month. I believe it's on the 28th. I'll double check. Yes. Thank you. October 28th. And it's based on the idea that an ounce of prevention is actually worth a pound of cure. It's an interdisciplinary conversation where we're bringing together 3 different professionals, Carol included. I'll be moderating to talk about how to mitigate risk as you scale your business. So this is not about driving sales. This is about preventing disaster from occurring in the future. We've got some really awesome people speaking with us. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Carol and Mathew, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ivy.
And listeners, viewers, stay tuned for many more LinkedIn Live shows here at Slater Success Live. Stay tuned either to LinkedIn, or you could come on directly onto slatersuccess.com and find out our schedule of when our next shows are going to be. We have some great guests coming up. For those of you who are curious about the cybersecurity world, we have we're in the midst of Women Leaders in Cybersecurity on Her Success Story, our podcast. Also, you can check that out on slatersuccess.com, and we're all on all the major podcast platforms. Feel free to leave comments, ask questions, and I will see you next time.